Oh, wait, what the fuck? Did they change that? Why can't I look left and right during this? This is peculiar. I didn't read any changes to the replay viewer coming. I'm gonna leave this real quick. Run it back.
Arriving at what?
I was for Gibraltar.
Ready for battle.
Alright, cool. Huh, so somehow I'm locked into only certain features. Can I? Alright, I could at least turn that on. I could still go into first person perspective. Alright, we're just gonna watch this. I can't fast forward. Can I rewind? You can go into third person. Interesting, interesting, interesting. Alright, so we're gonna pause it really quick. Alright. Alright, so the first thing that we always look at anytime we get started is our own team composition. So overall, the composition is fairly synergistic in terms of the support line and the tank line. The DPS line doesn't really reflect any brawl, but the rest of the composition really does. Ana can pump out a lot of healing. I know she just got a nerf, and the state of her is kind of like up in the air overall. ML7 seems to have some sort of problems with the amount of healing that she has right now, but it's yet to be seen whether or not the nerf is actually going to be detrimental to her or not. But the biggest thing that you're going to be aware of is Lucio, is that Lucio's biggest utility is going to come from his speed, right? He's going to have his boop and stuff to complement that. But being able to make slow characters fast is one of the biggest upsides to Lucio across the board, I think. So Reinhardt and Zarya are definitely going to depend on you a lot for enabling their aggression and making sure that they can catch up to those enemies who are backing up or are a little bit too far, because they have limited range and stuff. And Ana is going to need your help, kind of like if she gets dove or something. You have a bit of a backline, so the Soldier Ash might be lingering in similar areas to the Ana, but as a Lucio, I always like to be aware of where my other support is, because the only other person who can consistently give the other support healing is you as the other support. You know, the supports have to look after out for each other in that sort of way. Sorry about that. Set that to mute. Alright, so yeah, the first thing we're going to look at is our own composition. Like I said, you're going to be wanting to help your team move around a lot. You're going to want to be using those boops to keep people off of your Ana. Maybe if there's a Reaper, which right now we could see, but let's say you don't know at the time. You have to mentally prepare to keep certain characters off of your tanks and such. When we look at the enemy composition, we can see that there's no tank busters except for the tanks themselves. I mean, no, Doomfist is a fairly decent tank buster depending. Against Reinhardt, it could be a little bit trickier because of that steadfast passive, but Doomfist is a backline assassinator and such, so you're definitely going to want to be looking out for what that Doomfist is doing at most times, because he's going to be the biggest threat to just burst damaging your team. The scary thing about burst damage for a lot of people is the fact that it comes out of nowhere. Crazy thought, but what you have to do in order to counter burst damage at times is to be preemptive. So instead of being able to reactively heal someone, you have to prepare beforehand or be aware enough to notice that something is going to happen. If Doomfist is charging up his punch and aiming it at your Ana or something, or even your Zarya, you want to boop Doomfist out of the way so he can't really get that punch off, because if he lands the punch on Ana, there's nothing you can do. You've already kind of lost your Ana at that point. So once you scout this Doomfist, you're going to have to be aware that Doomfist is one of your biggest awareness threats, because you have to preemptively do things against some of his abilities.
5, 4,
Starting very high on the wall. Not exactly sure what you're doing up here. There's not a lot you can see, but I believe you said you were in comms for this, so it's mostly okay. So now you see this Doomfist coming out. You should be aware that he's going to be one of your biggest threats. Good boop on the Ashe. Helping your team reposition. Good. So, at this point, your team has already committed to a fight, and you're not there. It's cool that you're looking around and trying to keep your eyes peeled for things that are around, but you are ignoring the fact that you are... That's an annoying noise. You are your Reinhardt's and Zarya's biggest engage tool overall. So they're still depending, even if it's not amped, on your speed to help push them forward to catch up with those people that are getting CC'd back. So they're underneath, and you've kind of abandoned them. During the course of a fight, when you're brawling with a Reinhardt and Zarya too, it's very useful for them to have your boots to keep certain targets out of their kind of like proximity. So if Roadhog lands a hook or Torb starts using his overload ability, you're going to want to boop those people to displace them. Don't get boop happy if you see that your Rein is maybe charge happy, or your Zarya happens to be extra on point with the bubbles. But you can definitely be using your boops mid-brawl to aid them in this way. But they definitely could have used that speed to get in there, get a little bit more value, and kind of be a little bit more brawly. So your Ryan is getting antied a lot. And let's go look at your Zarya. Did she have bubble on cooldown? She did have bubble on cooldown, so there's nothing she could have done. There's not a lot you could have done in that situation if he goes and gets antied. Yeah. I'm gonna do my best to not go off on a tangent. Odd bubble. Nice body block. So, face peeking the enemies like that is a little bit dangerous. You're basically just daring them to hit the shot on you. The Ashe didn't seem to notice you for a little bit, or maybe, I don't know, she was just kind of like, what the fuck is this Lucio doing in front of me? But you're definitely tempting her to hit that headshot combo on that Ashe can basically just scope in, scope out, and you'll be dead in 2 seconds. So you want to be careful in just ending up in front of your enemies like that, which is why you generally, as Lucio, want to have very specific rollouts that you're doing from location to location when you're not comfortable fluidly wall riding. That wall ride ended you in a spot where there was no wall for an easy disengage because you kind of just landed on top of the box. So you want to be careful that you don't over aggress into the enemy like that. Going after the Ana again. So you don't need to overcommit to a fight like this. It's good that you got the Ana kill, but displacing her just a little bit and keeping her out of the fight for moments at a time is often enough. Sometimes what winds up happening when you pull your aggro like this is the team needs your specific type of utility. This is most detrimental with utility type characters because nobody can replace the type of utility that Lucio does, right? If the Ana happens to die or gets distracted and you see people getting low, maybe you can amp healing as a Lucio to keep your team up, but once you've pulled yourself away, you kind of completely negate the ability to give speed to the rest of your team and support your tank line. And at the point that you realize that your tank line seems to be kind of struggling so far, you know, the Ryan got antied, he's a little bit too far away from the wall, the Zarya doesn't have bubble for them. you need to be helping prop up the tank line a little bit more. So side frag was okay, but it's a little bit risky. Don't face check. Just don't face check. You should be scouting from angles that have quick disengages and that aren't often checked, but you should never be that far forward. If we go to your Ana's POV, I don't even know. I guess she maybe could have seen you. If you're going to face check like that, maybe at least having a line of sight on the Ana. But the only scouting you need to be doing at this point is holding the back button to see their composition. And then, you know, you can generally check very basic kind of like position routing from the enemy team from normal spots, right? If you're looking underneath the bridge, you can see if they're coming main. If they're not coming main, you can take a quick peek up top. But standing there like that is definitely a big no-no. You don't want to face check the enemies with hit scan, really anything, but you know, hit scan I guess kill you faster. So.
We need to take out that turret. Turret down.
So, again, you're kind of in their backline. Not a terrible thing, but I think I could understand where your teammates might be coming from, where you're saying, they said that, let me look back at the message so I know exactly. You just said that they didn't like the Lucio. Yeah, some teams want a more supportive Lucio player who plays around other people, and you seem to be kind of looking for an aggressive pick. And that's not terrible, but it does leave your team without your utility, and for some people it can be a detriment. If I have an aggressive run play style, or like if I'm playing with an aggressive Rhine and I'm playing a frag Lucio, you would think that works together, but if you're aggressing on 2 different locations and 2 different targets, it doesn't always work out. So, nice beat, but for the majority of that fight, you're focusing on a different target. I don't know what you would really do besides booping that monkey away, but you definitely don't need to full commit to just staying on the monkey. You could boop the monkey to displace him and then leave, because the monkey wasn't directly juggling anybody in the very middle of his ultimate. So you kind of spend a lot of time making sure that you can confirm the kill, and it's taking you away from the main presence of the fight where your tanks are. You know the Ashe can hit the shots. So, if she's... I mean, those shots are slightly different from the ones before, because you face checked before, and you really just gave her good line of sight and stood still. At least there you were moving, but you definitely went above to an open space. If I could fly around, it would kind of show you more of what I'm talking about, because there are areas that you can face, or not face check, but there are areas that you can kind of look around from while being close to cover or barely peeking out, right? So instead of wall riding on that wall over there, if you had been on the ship or been on the bridge, you could have kind of jiggle peeked in order to look, but you definitely don't need to be peeking for so long. You need to make them very brief glimpses at spaces where you think the enemies might be in order to gain information. The only people who want to be hard peeking from those areas are like Widow or somebody who can actually get real picks. But you keep constantly getting picked off early into these fights, or going into side duels that don't take you into the main fight. it's not that you're getting no value, it's just getting less value than you could, and your team is getting less value because they don't have your support always with them or constantly on top of them, right? If you maximize the time that you're alive and in the bulk of the fight, then I think you'll get more value out of a composition like this. In compositions where you're maybe playing more dive, if you have more mobile tanks or something, you don't always need to be with them. You can kind of go off on splits and stuff like that, because the tanks will always have an escape option at the end of the day. But if you speed boost and your Ryan catches the beginning of that, and then all of a sudden you just disappear and the Ryan needs you to help him disengage, then you've just screwed your team, you know? You're not getting no value, you could be getting more value, but you're making it so that your team can't get their value.
60 seconds remaining.
You should have amped speed to help your team get in there a little bit more. They might have not followed up with the amp speed, but it would have been better than just staying on amp heals. One of the biggest things that tank ultimates kind of suffer from, especially in lower ranks, is follow-up, because a lot of times you can get a really good tank ultimate, but you need people to actually follow up on the damage, because things like Zarya Grab and Rhine Shatter are simply CC abilities that allow other people a large opportunity, right? So you could have used speed there to encourage your team to follow up on that grab a little bit more convincingly, but they're playing scared right now because they don't know if they can be that aggressive anymore. Your Rhine was kind of trying it early on and then getting punished for it. So if you had either been with them more early on in order to help them engage and disengage properly, they would have probably played a more confident, aggressive style from this point on. Or if you had amped speed there and moved forward just a little bit on your own, the Rhine might have followed in order to try to follow up, might have had, you know, better positioning for Shatter, etc, etc, who knows, but playing scared there definitely negated any value that the grab could have had.
The payload has reached the checkpoint.
Enemy turret ahead.
Up the tempo.
Locked on.
You feel that?
Not a bad boop. A lot of time on healing there, the team needed a stronger disengage back to spawn. Not something you can always control though, because if they stop moving to like a set line place, it's, you know, not going to be very good. So this Orisa swap is, I think, the epitome of the team not feeling the speed boost present, because Orisa is the exact opposite of a Reinhardt, and this is basically your main tank saying, I don't have the speed that I thought I was going to have, so playing Reinhardt has become nearly worthless against the enemy composition. Because as a Reinhardt, you don't want to be in the midst of a composition like this, right? You don't want to be in the middle of two shotguns, an anti-nade, and a Moira. It's not preferable unless you can confirm quick and easy kills or get a lot of shatters. It's very hard to kill a Torbjorn if he's getting healed and has his overload on. Roadhog is notoriously difficult to kill. They just swapped onto the ball, so I won't really, or they recently swapped onto the ball, so I won't comment too much on there being a ball. But the Moira isn't any easier to kill, and the Ana has nade and sleep to punish them. So if they're not getting decisive, quick, kind of like kills and utility out of their support line in order to help them get this value, they're gonna feel hesitant, they're gonna feel scared, and they're gonna wind up just kind of like trying to default to a different solution that might not work. Hence this Orisa.
Tactical visor activated.
Close. If you had caught the, like if you had wall road off the door, you would have gotten a little speed boost and you might have caught it. But the hog might have hooked you.
Switching sides.
Anyway.
Initiating match.
I need to coach in a deeper voice. I need to just like settle my voice. No, I can't do it right now. I'm feeling all nasally inside, you know? I hate having a kind of like this nasally I feel like it sounds nasally at least. It's just not very productive to making people want to listen to me, you know?
Guess you're going.
Please, I have good ideas.
What happened to you?
Okay, so the Moira swap. I'm
For optimal chance of
gonna wait
survival,
until the last few seconds to confirm what the composition is gonna be before I start talking about it. Da, 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 da.
5, 4,
Oh,
3,
3,
2.
2. All right, new look team, completely brand new look team. So, it's almost funny because it's almost like the tank line and the DPS have almost swapped. I mean, the Ashe stayed the same, but the Reaper is a very rushdown brawly character. He can flank on his own, especially in ranked. But Reaper isn't traditionally someone who wants to be working on their own, because once you start focusing Reaper down, he starts to lose value because he doesn't have a lot of options in terms of dealing damage, right? He has the shotguns and then he has two type of movement abilities, right? Whereas someone, let's say like on the other team, Doomfist, every one of his abilities is a movement or damage ability at the same time. He has many ways of getting his damage through. So Reaper is, someone who you want to be helping get into close quarters. He would have been great with the Rein Zarya because he would have added an extra little punch. You speed boost him in with them. They can't get to him because he's behind the shield, and etc, etc. Your tanks, however, are now going for this type of poke composition. So Roadhog Orisa used to be a great composition to play together because Orisa could always just kind of throw out the shields all the time. But Roadhog would be able to just follow up on her halts with a hook, the halt hook combo. But ever since Orisa's shield has practically become paper, this hasn't been a very famous composition, because without the ability to negate any damage, Roadhog doesn't do anything for Orisa besides, give the enemy more ult charge, which Orisa is always already going to kind of do if she doesn't have another defensive ability to go with her. So this composition already is going to have a lot less protection and a lot more kind of ultimate bleed into the enemy team. So you've gone for the Moira, which is not a terrible decision. You can always default to Moira at any point right now. She's super broken for the most part, being able to get most types of damage through the tank lines if they're not paying very, very close attention, and being able to take advantage of players who can't aim, as well as outputting tons of healing. So Moira is probably going to service very well, but it's a little bit unnecessary, and there's two reasons, right? So the first reason is that your tanks are not going to be able to do anything if the enemies aren't made uncomfortable, right? So Moira can't make plays necessarily. Ana Sleep Dart is great for that. Lucio Boops are great for that. Zen Discord is great for that. But Moira is strictly a damage and heal character. She can get picks, but she can't make plays. Well, maybe when she gets Coalescence, she can. And if you're really crafty, she can. But just on a fundamental level, she doesn't have anything in her kit that helps her make plays. So your tanks it's going to come down to your tanks and your DPS in order to really make plays and make opportunities for the rest of the team. Now, this sounds practical. Yes, why do my tanks not make space and make opportunities for the rest of us? Why shouldn't they? Well, because you're unranked and you want to win. So shouldn't depend on people when you don't have to, right? Your team will do a lot of close range damage between Reaper and Hog. But if they play at a range, or if they play at a pace you can't keep up with, then you're gonna start to lose traction. You also have an unnecessary amount of healing between Moira and the Ana, with not a lot of utility. Ana has some utility, but Moira has absolutely none. So there's not a lot of value that you're going to be. There's not as much value as you can get, right? The Ana could probably keep everybody healed on her own, but you're gonna wind up taking some of her healing, some of her ult charge, which maybe will take some of the pressure off because you won't have as much defense. But you know, you'll see how it plays out depending on how your tanks play their characters or their heroes. Okay, good. You're doing the little feather push, but Roadhog gets caught up in a Roadhog Roadhog battle. You get the pick because their Roadhog just has atrocious positioning. But now because you have no defensive abilities, and as Moira, your only ability is to kill or heal, Doomfist is able to get an easy one-shot. So their composition has a similar problem to yours. Once the Reinhardt is down or out of position, there's nothing anybody else can really do. They swap to a Sigma, so we'll see how you deal with that now. One suggestion I have for Moira is that early into the fight you want to throw out a damage orb. Normally your healing orb will come back online before you need to be burst healing your allies unless they do something stupid. This will help you get a little bit more ult charge, get coalescence up a little bit faster. You generally want to be doing things like that before the enemies show themselves, so you want to be throwing it around corners where you know they're going to come from. Unfortunate, you're a little bit far back from the shield, but the shield is paper, so you don't want to really rely on the shield that much. 600 health is about as much health as D.Va has, and just about as much surface area too. So I'm not exactly sure why you're moving forward while using this Coalescence. Coalescence has, oh my god, Coalescence has great range. So there's really no reason for you to be moving into the enemies like that, especially because half really is going to come from you, excuse me, your allies. You're not a DPS, you're a Moira, you're a support. So if you're DPSing, your DPS cannot heal you, you know? So you definitely want to be trying to take that step back and focusing on healing your allies, and then if you can, also damage enemies. Good fade.
When faced with a setback, we must challenge our assumptions.
Why is the payload stopped?
So you throw out the healing orb a lot, and it seems like most of the time you're doing it because you want your allies to be able to walk into it almost, like it heals people for you without you having to notice them. But you shouldn't have to depend on your healing orb bouncing around in order to keep your allies up. Moira has incredible healing per second, especially coupled with Ana, so you can kind of... I know earlier I said you don't want to rely on your allies when you don't have to, but you do have to trust your allies on some level, you know? It's a weird balance of, like, don't let them do what you can do, but don't do things that they could do for you, so you could do other things. So you can kind of let Diana, you know, heal a little bit and, you know, kind of carry the brunt of it. She may be spending less time healing allies because you're keeping them so topped off, and maybe actually acting more as a DPS Ana than anything else. Which is something that can tend to happen sometimes, but at the very least you got healed up. No, you didn't even get healed up all the way. again, you're walking very deep into kind of like enemy controlled area. I'm not sure why you hold this coalescence for so long. But you kind of like walk over the cart into open space for no reason. I know you're trying to like chase people down and such and try to confirm kills, but you could very well do that from a static position on the back of the cart where you can have a good perspective of the fight, so you know who needs to be saved when they need to be saved. Part of a lot of support play is making sure that you're always in a good position to keep people alive. So even if you're playing Zen or something like that, and you know you're sniping everybody and you're hitting all the shots, you want to make sure that your LOS is so that if your DPS suddenly gets dropped down to 2, you can instantly get harmony on them or trance them if they're going to get bladed. Because if you start walking close to someone, if you start walking into the enemies and you're still hitting headshots, your ally behind you now are not getting healed because you can't tell that they need healing. So just be careful with your positioning in terms of getting too close.
The true struggle is for the superiority of ideas.
Wonder how long we're up to on this VOD. I don't want to give you a terribly long VOD to review, but I guess it's only going to be as long as this game is, plus or minus maybe 10 or 15 minutes or so. I think when I looked at this before, it was like, what, 25 minutes, so hopefully this will only be like 35 minutes. So same composition as before versus a very different composition. So I think this is going to be why you wind up getting the end score of 6-3s, because now they're taking out that Bastion. They have a big shield on their side, Mercy Res, a good balanced support line with plenty of healing for their Roadhog and Bastion. So it's not a perfect composition, but it definitely counters yours since you don't have really any shield at all and nearly no defensive ability. So they're going to get, I'm sure, a strong start out of this. And if they don't, you probably would win straight out, because keeping Bastion off card is very important. So you don't even know what they have at this point because you aren't even looking. I'm not sure what's up with this positioning or what you're trying to do, but all you are doing right now is denying yourself information. Even if you are in comms, all of the communication that you get from your allies will not give you a full picture. Sometimes you have to be using your own eye, and in a situation like this where you could be standing behind a shield, gaining that information on your own, it's fairly pointless to be standing on this kind of high ground. Not unless your plan is to counter anybody coming onto the high ground, but you're not even checking bridge properly in order to do that. Okay, now the real damage starts. You see almost instantly your tanks get evaporated, Bastion gets set up, and you have to run away. Your Reaper's gonna go in. I'm gonna defend your Reaper in terms of diving Bastion is the best way to do it. So in a situation like that, you might just want to pay attention to characters like Reaper or Tracer or Genji, because they may go in at odd times. But if you give them proper support, you can kind of make it work, right? If one person feeds, it's feeding. If 2 people feed, it's probably a set play. Probably a plan. That's a dive right there. It's not feeding anymore.
30 seconds remaining.
So you got your Reaper topped up, and then you backed up, and he wasn't able to confirm the kill on the Roadhog. A target he should be able to kill. So by this point, they've already taken high ground with their Hanzo Mercy. They've already thrown out ults with their Roadhog. They already have full cart possession because their Reinhardt is mitigating any forms of damage that you could really be throwing at them from the front, right? So the D.Va is definitely going to help a lot in terms of mitigating the Bastion. So all you can really do at this point as a Moira is heal your allies and kill the enemies, right? You want to be looking for maybe individual picks that you can find without abandoning your team. the biggest problem I would say with that coalescence was the fact that you were looking for kills, and you were only looking for kills. So you managed to keep your Orisa up by using it a little bit in the beginning, but your coalescence was not necessary to keep your Orisa up. But what you tried to do was you tried to frag through the enemy team, and what wound up happening was, because your team was split and not invested on killing everybody in that exact moment, was your coalescence kind of wound up crumbling apart. The Reaper wasn't exactly in there at the time. The Roadhog was behind, but he wasn't kind of like investing himself into the fight as much. It looks like Ashe is rotating right now, so I can't rewind to see where she was a few moments ago, but the full team's full investment was not in that fight, and your coalescence was focused on the enemy team without any of your allies really there to get any of its kind of like, you know, support or benefit. So it was just impossible for you to get the maximum value out of it. You're not always going to look for maximum value, but you're definitely not going to be able to kill a competition like this by just throwing your coalescence out there, right? They have too much sustain. Bastion is absolutely shredding through all of your stuff because there's not enough pressure on the enemy team. I'm not exactly sure where okay, your Reaper is now going in. But the brunt of the damage on your team is going to wind up coming from that Reaper, just because of the fact that Ashe is only going to be able to do damage when there's not a Rhine shield in her way, or when there's not another Ashe pressuring her out. So the Ashe is kind of made obsolete by the amount of pressure that comes from, you know, the enemy DPS, the Roadhog hook hitting her, maybe stuff like that, you know. Standing still in the open is a big no-no. I'm glad you got hit so that I could point that out, honestly. Stand in spawn. So your team is kind of constantly going in there and feeding one at a time, and there's not a lot you can do about that. I think if you were a different support, you might have been able to keep them up a little bit longer, right? Moira can't heal through shields anymore, which is unfortunate because that was a great bug for Moira mains, I guess. But what she also can't do is she doesn't have any like big life-saving ability, right? She doesn't have beat, which is like huge for saving somebody's life. Coalescence is still healing over time. She doesn't have nano, which is burst healing. She doesn't have trance, which is ridiculous healing. She doesn't have immortality field or anything like that. And your teams are often going beyond the shield. So unless you coalesce one person, not a terrible decision, you can't save anybody on the other side of the shield, you know? There's just kind of a limiting factor to Moira in this sense, where she can't save people as easily as other supports can. If you were better, more decisive, constantly had your ultimate up, Moira, you could probably save a lot of people. How do you get your ultimate up? You throw damage orb at the beginning of the fight. You keep poking people down with your damage, but you keep your healing on as much people as possible. You want to splash your healing onto as many people as possible. Let that residual healing that comes at the end of Moira's heal go on. And if you don't know what that is, Moira's healing has like heal over time. Like if you hit them, they'll get healed for like 75 for every second you hold it on them, but then after you let go, it'll heal them for I think like 35 per second for the next 2 seconds or something like that.
It's a good reminder.
So you guys are kind of deciding to mirror the composition, and then it looks like you're throwing some upgrades onto it, basically. Orisa Sigma for the double shield instead of having a Roadhog. This means you lose a little bit of a shield break, but you're definitely going to get, you know, shield. Well, actually, you'll have less shield than the Reinhardt, but you'll have shield flexibility. So it's gonna put a lot of dependency on your tanks having the combo together. But it looks like, let's see what your pocket looks like and who you're going to really be spending most of your time on. First push, tanks aren't shielding the Bastion very well. so he winds up getting picked off. That's a very, very stupid res to go for because you have to be aware of the sight lines as much as possible. So you go for that, and the Bastion can still see you, and he's able to pick you off. If you stay alive in that fight, you might be able to kind of tempo your ult up a little bit faster and get a little bit more value of the duration of your life. Maybe even have Valkyrie, or like I said, you can mass heal and get a big push forward even sooner. You're getting your ult up pretty fast here, but imagine if you had stayed alive. Okay, again, rezzing in a bad spot. You can't just hit the res button instantly. At least take some time to kind of measure back and forth, or have complete, like you have to be a complete safety. Maybe you have to let your tanks know that you're healing them, or you're rezzing or whatever. But you definitely can't just instantly hit the res button like that. It's almost basically just hitting a suicide button at that point. I know you wanted to fly to that Orisa to get her healed faster, but you definitely could have pathed a little bit better. You didn't take a big risk by going where you went, but you did open yourself up to a little bit of LOS at the time. I always think those moments in terms of if you faced someone who was, you know, top 500 or pro, they would have been able to punish you. And even though you were punished in that moment by those enemies, you definitely were still in danger. I think that was maybe res management. I don't think you realized that you didn't have res, so you dropped down to the low ground and couldn't get back up fast enough.
A clean bill of health.
May's scream always terrifies me. It always makes me feel scared for her. When you're in Valkyrie, you really have to pay attention to what the bulk of your team's health is. Because you were healing for a little bit of time where you could have been damage boosting. Small things though. Going into that room, I think you can see, looking back on it, that it was a bit of a suicide mission. I don't think you were trying to res because you didn't have res. Unless you really don't play Mercy and your res management, like your understanding of that cooldown was just really that bad. So this is the same thing that's happening on Moira, right? You're not doing a terrible job healing your team, you're not doing a terrible job keeping people propped up, but you're not really doing anything aside from being a general heal bot at this point. And while you were dealing damage on Moira and you're damage boosting here, there's definitely an inability in your team to confirm kills and to put pressure on the enemy shield. That res, I would have done it. I would have done it. It was worth it. It was I mean, you're definitely gonna be missing. They're definitely gonna be missing value since Diana will end up dying. But I mean, to be honest, who's not gonna take that res? Neptuno probably would have just pilled out his pistol and not taken the res, but Neptuno's actually good, so you know. And I don't mean that as take your pistol out. That's not what I mean. So this is now the problem with your composition. While you block, shatter, and stuff like that, the Bastion is going to be able to lay out more damage than you have in terms of shielding and healing, because nobody can put proper pressure on him, right? Nobody can go over to the Bastion and frag him very easily, because everybody has to spend their time, you know, kind of like worrying about themselves. Mei is a close range brawler, but at the same time, Sigma doesn't like being too close to people. He benefits from range. So there's a lot of kind of discord within your team's composition on a fundamental level, and it's causing problems in the way that the players on your team are putting pressure on the enemy team, and you're not doing anything to try to resolve it. You're just trying to keep them alive as best you can. You can take these as L's and just say, well, let's move move on to the next one. But support players that main support and want to climb in support know that there's going to be way too many of these games to let them slip by. You have to be able to pick the right support and pick the right hero in order to kind of get value, or learn how to get the right types of value out of the support you like playing, right? So as much as you don't condone DPS mercy, maybe you want to go get a frag or two when your Valk comes out. Quick frags, you don't want to be spending your entire Valk trying to frag somebody and abandon your team. You definitely, as Mercy, need to be more aware of your res cooldown and when that's going to come back online. That's a very important cooldown. And when you're using it, you need to be more aware of the line of sight. Don't just go res instantly. Take a second. Read the room. You have, at least 6 seconds to res them back up. So take your time. When it comes to Moira, you can be throwing out your damage orbs a little bit earlier into the fight in order to get that coalescence up. And you want to be throwing out coalescence like it's fucking candy on Halloween. Because coalescence is one of the easiest ultimates to build in the game. And it still gets a lot of impact. It's almost like Pulse Bomb. If you use it right, it will get impact. And how do you use it right? Hit both your allies and your enemies at the same time. You don't necessarily need to keep it to save somebody's life or anything. As long as you keep tempoing the ult, which means using it in order to constantly apply pressure when you can't apply pressure through normal means, you can kind of like constantly keep the DPS and the pressure on the team, your team's pressure on the enemy team up, and you can help the DPS and you can support at the same time. It does a lot for the team as a whole. When it comes to playing Lucio, gotta stop the face peaks. If you're playing with a team that goes forward and wants to go in, you have to play with your tanks. They're depending on you, they're looking for you, and they're expecting you to be there on some level. The fragging, not a terrible thing, but if you cannot do it quickly, then you have to just leave the half health target alone, because you're leaving the rest of your team to kind of be stranded on their own, There's a lot of things I think that you could improve on besides that, but most of the problems I think you have can be resolved not mechanically simply, but like the last two characters were basically non-mechanic characters in any way, shape, or form. But Lucio, your mechanics seemed a little bit shaky, but I think you could probably improve a lot more on your decision making and moment-to-moment usage of the character overall before you start worrying about if you can aim or not, So that's going to be it for this. I'm going to cut this stream off and probably start another review in a second after I figure out dinner plans. I don't know why I'm telling you this. I'm cutting the fucking stream. You'll see this when you see this.